Welcome to Professor Game. Here, we normally interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking to bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. But today, we will have a special, different episode. There's no guest. And I'll be running through my experience during Gamification Europe with a small surprise right after. I'm Rob Alvarez and I work at IE Business School Publishing, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. For me, it all started what I call Day 00, with a dinner and an interaction with other amazing gamification experts and gurus. There, we had a chance to interact, to talk, to see what were our expectations for the conference, and to have some fun. Right after that, we had Day 1. There, before we started all the speeches, I got to meet again with some of my friends. And then we started with the first keynote speaker, who was Jeff Gomez. And he was talking about the collective journey and how the hero's journey cannot serve us anymore as it did before. I think this is especially relevant in a classroom setting where there's not a single hero, but we have a collective journey. The journey that the learners go through. And I would say that was the key learning that I got from this session. Right after the keynote session, we had a networking and coffee break. But I'll get into the networking coffee breaks and the lunches and the dinners that we had fully for all of them later on. The next session was a showing that Joris Bearda from the Actalysis group had of a gamification project that they have been working on with an international sales team that they were helping to engage. It included many amazing things, but one of the things that called my attention very deeply was the overlay of an old map that they put on top of a Google map that they already use every day. And this map was super engaging. You could see their routes, what they were doing, where they were engaging, what they were doing with the clients. So it was very, very interesting. It was very visual. It had a lot of visual elements. It seemed to be very engaging, and they were getting some pretty awesome results from the first and the next iterations that they had with this project. One key that I would like to highlight from this presentation that Joris had is to integrate your project with what your users, what your players, what your learners are already using. In a classroom setting, you can perhaps think of the mobile phones, perhaps you can think of the books, perhaps you can think of the desks where they're sitting. Think of the things that they're already using and take advantage of that. Don't forget that there's elements that are already out there that can help you in your design. Then we listened to Toby Beersford from Rise Global, that gamification guru list, where he was talking about how his journey took him into gamification. He talked about his dashboards, he talked about the many things he's gone through, even the UN, that have led him into the path of where he is now. I would say that's something very important, very useful for us to highlight from this journey, from all these things that he mentioned, is the fact that he uses data and dashboards to track progress, to track your metrics, and to make sure you're reaching the objectives that you've actually set out to reach. Then we had a talk with Jan Storgaards. I've said quite a few names and last names here. I hope I'm not butchering too much of the names of the people that were on the talks, and I apologize in advance to anybody whose last name I have mispronounced. But the talk, once again, of Jan Storgaards was centered on how he has seen the growth and the demand for gamification and the many things that we're capable of learning from games and how they're being used right now for innovation. A key from his talk, I would say, is to be always in the lookout for innovation in whatever you're doing. And of course, if you're interested in gamification and how gamification can help for that innovation. The next session, we were split into two groups. I think both groups were very fortunate because one of the groups where we were in a workshop with Sabrina Bruwaller and Vasilis Gogidis. The other group had a massive escape room that was led by Michiel van Junen. Once again, for any of the last names I pronounced, I apologize in advance. The workshop where I participated with Vasilis and Sabrina was very insightful. I would encourage you to actually take a look at the video and try to set up perhaps with some of your colleagues, some friends, and try to sit down and do the workshop as though you were there, See the videos when they tell you to do an exercise, do the exercise, and you'll even have some advantage because they were limited by 90 minutes and you don't need to limit yourself to 90 minutes. So perhaps you can take a bit more time in the exercises and go in a bit deeper. So I encourage you to actually listen to the whole workshop and go through the steps yourself with a group of friends perhaps. I have to say once again, it was it's very insightful. But the key I would like to highlight from this workshop for you engagers is to follow a process. Follow whatever the process you want to follow. There's many processes out there for gamification. There's many people creating awesome things for gamification. But follow a process and be sure to include within that process, or to follow a process that includes playtesting, interaction with your actual users or potential similar users to what you will be expecting as your players. Then once again, for the next session, we were split into 2 rooms. There I had the opportunity to listen to Sylvester Arnab, and there he was talking about hybrid solutions. We've heard from him before. If the name sounds familiar to you, you can go back to episode 5 of this podcast. He's Sylvester Arnab and the episode number 5. If the name doesn't ring any bells and you want to listen to more about him, once again, go to episode 5 of this podcast. You just go to professorgame.com/podcast/005. Right after him, we had the opportunity to listen to Alex Chalkias from Nokia in Greece, where he explained how they used gamification to engage their employees into learning a new technology. In their case, it was 5G. They were learning this technology to later implement inside the company. I would say that a very important point to remember and to listen to from his talk was about always remembering which is your objective when you're doing gamification. Don't forget why you are implementing gamification, what your objective is, and always keep it in mind. Always keep it within your pocket, within very close reach, so that you can always guide your actions towards that final objective. For those of us in that room, the day closed with Anne Coppens and her speech. There, she delved into what she has now coined as FAIL, first attempt in learning. I'm proud to share that some of her stories were first told in our episode 004 here in Professor Game. And it was pretty amazing. There were very deep things that she shared in that speech. And a key that I would like to highlight from all the stories that she shared and all the learnings she's had is to remember that your first attempts might fail and to be ready for that. And to be ready not only to fail, but to learn from those failures and iterate in your design. Maybe something that you tried didn't work out as you expected, but always be ready to adjust and to iterate in your design. Day 2 had a slight change in the agenda. You know, things happen, there's unexpected. And in this case, it was Melinda Jacobs. She had some flight delays and couldn't deliver the speech on day 1. So she was the first point on the agenda in day 2. She talked about how the narrative is actually the story that you're trying to tell with your system. For example, she said that not too many people would be willing to play a round of Pac-Man before the ATM gives them their money. So the key insight here that I would like to pull off from her talk is to think of the narrative as a story that you want your learners to take away. Always bear that in mind. What is the story? What's the narrative? What's the whole theme that you want them to get out of your class with, to finalize your session with? What do you want them to take away? Next, we continued with Marigo Raftopoulos, who went in deep into how gamification arrived into her life, but especially she also questioned many of what she initially thought of as great successes of gamification. But then she said, is this actually a gamification success? Or is it a failure? That was a very interesting and very insightful talk. The key here, I would say, is to analyze the results of the implementation of your gamification. Always think deeply if what you have achieved is actually a success, and if it is not, where you might want to shift. Right after that, we had a lot of fun with Professor Karen Cham. She's a colleague of Pete Jenkins at the University of Brighton. She reminded us that gamification is not an end in itself. It is just a way to achieve a certain objective. That's what I would highlight as a key to her talk. The next session featured Erkan Altug Yilmaz from Gamification Turkey, who convinced us, using many of the known gamification frameworks, that actually gamification does work because of science. The key here, I would say, is to use gamification that, when done well, it actually works. Next up was Dominique Mangiatordi, who showed us a case study of gamification. It was very interesting, and I would say that the key of this talk was to remember that the cooperation can be a very powerful driver for engagement, a strong driver for behavior. It's not always just about the competition, and it's a mistake to always just go for the competition. Remember that cooperation is also a very powerful option. We also had a lot of fun with Andrei Marchevsky, who created a fictional character, Dave, to keep the names of the innocent in some fail that he has observed in his experience. I would say that there's two very large highlights of this talk because he had three experiences. There are two that were related to rewards. And the key there, I would say, is to think of your rewards through. Don't just say, oh, I'm going to give a reward and come up with the first thing that comes to your mind. Think them through. And always remember to not substitute the intrinsic motivation with extrinsic rewards. Always remember that effect of over-justification. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just put it in Google, or especially with Andre. He has some very interesting insights into this. And the other one is again, if you want to go deeper, there's an actual blog post that he has on solutioneering. And it can be briefed into saying that you shouldn't create a solution if there's not a problem. Don't just create a solution and then look for a problem. Always create solutions for problems that you have found and that need to be solved. The last session that I have to say that I was actually deeply paying attention to, and this is because the next session I was actually a speaker, was the workshop of Michael Wu. It was great help to take the first steps in gamification using data. He's also not only a gamification expert and a PhD, but he's also very much into digging into business analytics, into big data, into using all of these things for driving business. And in this case, I would say that it's fundamental that when you level up in your designs, in your gamification designs, and start to use complex systems that have, different levels, that have different things, remember that you need to balance these levels out, that you need to balance out the rewards. And he had some very useful information to give to us in that direction. The last session had 3 talks in each room, but once again, I was in one of those rooms and I was actually getting ready to deliver my own. So I must confess I wasn't able to pay as much attention as I would have liked to my other 2 colleagues as I did during the rest of the conference. So I'll leave you to see the rest of the videos so you can create your own opinions. Now I want to refer to the networking coffee breaks, the lunches, and the dinner, where there is a bunch of things that I want to talk about. The first of them is that talking to people face to face always wins over online. The relationships that you can create, the strengthening of relationships that you can create, the way you can convey your messages, the learnings you can get from people, it always beats face-to-face from online. I know that the world has become a lot smaller now that we have all these online tools, now that we have social media. There's so many people we can get to meet that probably otherwise we wouldn't be able to meet. But once again, if you have the chance to go to a conference, if you have the chance to actually go to a place and meet these people in person, if you have any chance of doing all of these things, please take that opportunity and make the best of it, because seeing people face to face, the learning is definitely something that improves anything that you might want to say. So once again, the other highlight is that I was able in these coffee breaks to strengthen relations and even to create new ones. I was able to meet in person. I met Marigo Raftopoulos, I met Melinda Jacobs, Ahmed Hossam, Erkan Alto-Gilmaz, Vasilis Gogidis, Sabrina Bruweiler, Jeff Gomez, Pete Jenkins, and many, many other people that are very relevant in this world of gamification, that have many things that they can teach us in a very simple manner. And just through interacting with them, I was able to gain a lot of insights and a lot of things that I will hopefully be bringing back to you here through Professor Game. The other thing that I was able to get in these coffee breaks for myself was getting last-minute ideas for my talk. I've heard before that when you give a speech, it's always important to react to what other people have said as well in the stage, and to show people that you have actually been at the conference, and show them that you've also been learning just like them, to be a bit more relatable. So that's something that I did, and I did include some bits into my talk from things that other people were talking about. And of course, always for me, listening to other people, listening to their ideas, to their inspiration, listening to the things, and that's why I created Professor Game. Listening to others always helps me spark my creativity, and I'm sure it can help you a lot. It's always a chance as well to practice the active listening, and when you're in face-to-face, it's a chance to also make follow-up questions, to show you're interested, and to go even further with what you're talking about. And well, last but not least, the small surprise I had for the end is that I have copied here the audio of my talk at Gamification Europe. I hope you enjoy it. By the way, next week we will have Bernardo Letaif from Blue Rabbit in Mexico. He's the founder and creator of the gamification software of the year. And it's a software for education, which is his main focus. So I'm sure you will be very interested in this, and I will ask you to stay tuned as well. As promised before, here's my talk at Gamification Europe. If you want to find the full video on my slides, you can just go to the episode's show notes at professorgame.com/podcast/010 as in 10. So 010. Have a great week and see you next time!
So thank you very much. Let's get started. For me, it all started when I was around maybe 9 years old. I was switching from my Nintendo to the Nintendo magazine. So I could just wonder, what could the jobs of these people be like? I had an estimation that was a very serious young boy. I said, well, maybe 80% of the time is spent, playing games, hard on playing, and 20% of the time is, writing the articles about the games they played. You can argue with me, it could be 90-10, 70-30, 50-50. But that's not the type of job that we're normally used to thinking about, right? At least not when I was a kid. That's not the kind of fun thing that you do in a job. Jobs are, serious stuff. But anyways, of course at some point I had to grow up after that 9 years old, and this was probably my last console for quite a few years. I grew up, into the serious world, and I'm going to do a very fast forward into some of the things that happened and why they were relevant to my journey. So I did a software engineering major. I realized that coding was not for me. I didn't want to, and I didn't. But it was a very useful background for many things. Then I realized that education was a superpower, that it could change the world, people's lives, and many things, right? Then I made an MBA at an incredibly resilient business school in Latin America, in Venezuela. These guys, even being there, they can still get international recognition, which sounds ridiculous given the things that happen in my country. So yes, I am from Venezuela. I'm very proud to say that. There's many things going on there. I'm not going to get political, so let's move on to the next slide. I'm also Polish, and that's why I came to Europe, right? Given that I'm also Polish, I had the right to be in Europe for, working. So my next time was in Spain. When I arrived to Spain, I started working at IE Business School, as Vasilis was saying. I'm not exactly a professor. I give one or other session. I mainly work there as in a department called IE Business School Publishing, where we create interactive, engaging learning materials. Sound, familiar? So that was my next mission. I was there, and I was very, very happy because it was finally one of my dreams come true. I was working in education, and many of my abilities were coming to be very useful and relevant for this new role. I had a tech background, so I worked with developers, so that was very relevant. I got to understand them, they got to understand me, which is, you might be surprised how challenging that is. That was very relevant. I was also very passionate about education, so working for a business school, university, made a lot of sense for me. I had an MBA, so I could understand the professors that we were working for, because our team is composed of a professor who is the one who is the owner of the content itself. There was the project managers, which we were doing basically the learning experience design, and we were like at the center of also the team of developers. We had designers, audiovisual professionals, all these people working together to create learning materials. And then, I was just walking around, doing my role, doing my job, and I stumbled into something that basically changed my life. It was gamification. For me, it was a complete game changer. Many of the things that had been going on in my life just bumped into each other and came together. And it was an incredible experience for me. I mean, finding gamification, I said, well, this all makes sense. So I found a material and I said, this is one of my projects I was working on. I said, I'm going to make this work. So I started researching, I started reading from amazing people. I did just week 1 of Kevin Werbach's Coursera course, and that's probably the first mistake I made. Then I continued reading, but of course, as usual, you get deadlines. Nothing gets done without a deadline. And deadlines were coming in. I needed to have all this time to design all these things. And I said, well, I have to pause research mode, and I have to get right into the work. Of course, I had heard that this gamification thing has a lot to do with points, badges, and challenges, not leaderboards. Those were the things I found initially. And I decided, this material here, all this content, why not? I'm not a racist, so badges here, badges there, badges over there, challenges and badges, 2 badges over there, badges all over the place. It was a wild mess, I have to say that. Badges have to be meaningful, we already know that, but I didn't. At that point, I didn't know at all. So the first challenge came in. The developer said, you know, all the stuff you're creating here looks pretty good, but you know, we don't have sufficient time within our budget to do all of these things you're proposing, so you have to cut it back. Get back to work, you know, back into design mode, do all these things, all these changes, and finally, you know, I get to the developers and they say, well, okay, that's enough. We'll have time to do this. Good thing is it's an internal team, so we were working very close together. They made questions. I went up to them and see what was going on. Looked at that. Oh, the badge looks amazing. Yeah, just move it a bit to the right, a bit to the left. You know, more badges. Oh, why don't we add another badge over here? Oh, yeah, that's simple enough. Let's do it. Badges all over the place. And then, of course, came the time of reckoning. I had to present the project, which was completely ready. You know, getting it right the first time by Ann Coppins. So we thought we had it right. Well, I thought I had it right for the first time. The developers just did what I asked them to do. And I presented it to management. So senior members of the team come in, say, you know, we have some feedback. When they say that kind of thing, it's not the kind of feedback we use in gamification. It's, you probably did something wrong. So it was a very big blow for me. I have to say I was devastated at that point because, of course, I spent all that time doing badges and you know, those challenges and badges and badges and badges and badges. So I said, you know, this gamification thing is probably kicking me back, and that's why my design is not as good as it should be. So I had, you know, I'd say I had a pretty rough night. I didn't sleep very well. But in the morning I said, you know what? I'm going to make this work. I'm going to continue. I'm going to move on to the next step. Like when, you know, you're in a game and you go into a hallway and there's only one way you can go. I mean, the game's telling you, you gotta go that way. There's not too much more you can do about it. So I did. I moved on, I continued there, and I started back into research mode. I said, look, even if it's my personal time, my wife here is not gonna be very happy about that, but I'm gonna take some time, I'm gonna do some proper research, I'm gonna study some more, I'm gonna look at amazing people that I see in conferences, I'm gonna read some more, I'm gonna do some more initially free courses, everything I could find, and I really went into it. And I've heard before that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So here in my case, it was also a bit of enthusiasm and passion. And one of the senior members that gave me very serious feedback, he said, well, you know, I think we can work together and make this work. That was not very typical, so that he got together, gave me the bad feedback, but also some things that we could do to make a sort of quick fixes and improve the material. And I have to say, in the end, we did quite a very decent material. This is one of the examples of the stuff that we do. I just wanted to put something there while I'm talking. I just didn't want to have the game over all the time. So I moved into something else. So I just want to get back into all the things that happen here and tell probably in gamification terms. So initially, I had a very strong boost of extrinsic motivation. You know, I want to do this thing. Let's get this done very quickly. I had the first slump. That always happens. And there was where I had to find something inside of me, some internal, intrinsic motivation to get me going, to complete the journey, to move on and to go to the next step. And that's where, you know, the badges were no longer useful to just get me going. And so that was the initial thing. The things that I found, where I found the motivation, I have to say the first one was mastery. I wanted to master this new ability. I wanted to master the ability to do gamification for education. That was one of my first things that I realized. The next thing that I realized is that this was a place for me to be creative. I'm an engineer, but my mom is a designer. My dad used to be an actor, a writer, and a director. So they were a creative couple. I was not. I'm an engineer. But this was the place. Yeah, I know. I know. But I was not the classic creative type. I'm not the guy that's going to sit around and do traditional design. That was just not my thing. But I realized that in gamification, there was a space for me. There was a place where I could be creative and do things that could be in the creative type. And I was, you know, stoked. Then I found also a mentor, the senior member of the team, mentoring me into understanding new things, understanding how it worked. He was not from the gamification background, but from the learning experience design. And of course, he knew many of the things that I did, even without knowing gamification, they were wrong, period. So those kind of steps he was able to take and guide me through those things. And another thing I realized was that once these materials were created, had the ability to go to the classroom and see the session in which they were used and see the difference that they could make in students. So that relatedness for me, seeing how it was impacting, how our materials were impacting the students and their learning, was absolutely amazing. And the final one is I realized, once again, that there was a further purpose for me in gamification. Using gamification to make education amazing became my purpose. So let's make a quick, very fast recap of all the things that got together. I started with Nintendo, Nintendo magazine, 80% of playing. Then I did some software engineering. I did my MBA, which helped me, talk to professors and understand these things. I realized that education was a superpower that could help the world be a better place. And there's something else that I'm going to talk about because I'm going to go back. After a few years doing this gamification in our materials, I said, you know what? I love what I'm doing, but I want to reach a further audience. And what else can games teach us? How can we reach other people? No matter how large your marketing budget is, you can reach so many people with marketing. The only way to reach other people is to use people who reach other people. So I said, you know what, I'm going to use something I didn't talk about. I used to have a radio show about entrepreneurship. So I really enjoy doing interviews. I really enjoy the format of talking to people and making interviews and bringing out all of that knowledge, all of that expertise from other people. However, I'm licensed as a radio show guy in Venezuela. It's absolutely useless by now. But the important thing here is I realized, radio can't make it that far. So I said, why not start a podcast? And that's exactly what I did. I started Professor Game Podcast. I'm now interviewing amazing people. Many of the guests that have been in the show are here today. I can see Sylvester, I can see Anne over there. I'm not sure, Pete's in the other room. One of the winners of yesterday, Yukai Chao, is also, as well as Anne, is also in the other room. Is also in the amongst the guests. So I started this because I wanted to reach people who did something probably near to what I've been doing for all this time, and to convince them to realize what they can do with gamification in their own classrooms. So it's not just about the business school where I work in, it's about reaching other people anywhere in the world to be able to do these things. Badge for me. This is a Spartan finisher, another story, but anyways. I was very, very happy to do all these things. I've been interviewing all these people. It all got together, coming to these conferences, meeting these amazing people I researched from, I read from, I did their courses, their programs, their books. I did almost everything I could find. There's still many things I have to read, of course, but that's the way I reached all of these things. And yes, of course, I am going to plug my own podcast. I've been starting. It's almost been a month. I'm very happy to announce it. It's professorgame.com. If you want to reach out, please do. There you'll find the iTunes, Stitcher Radio, etc., etc., etc. My final message to you guys is, it's not about my journey and how I went through all of these steps. I can say, I'm very special. We're all special and different in a way. My message here is about how all of us can use gamification to change the world in different ways. My way, and now having this background in education, is realizing that there's very few things that we cannot learn. There might be people here who are absolute gurus and experts in gamification and who haven't done it all, because I think there's always a next step, but have done all of these things. There's people in the medium level, and there's people starting off. So to all of us, there's many things that we can still learn. We can come to these conferences, we can meet other people who are doing the same things that we're doing, learn from them. We can get somebody to mentor us, even if it's not directly. Reading a book from somebody and really taking in the lessons is like getting a mentor. It's almost paying somebody to mentor you. All of these things we can do. And I want to call out to each and every one of you in this room, and hopefully the video will be uploaded somewhere else as well, to make your effort and to go into gamification, understand all of these things, and garner the power of education, and make education amazing using gamification. Thank you very much.
Cool, you're still around. Well, I hope you have an amazing 2018, that all your purposes come true. And well, I hope also that one of your purposes is to include gamification into your classroom, into your teaching, into your learning. And well, that's it. Thanks for listening to Professor Game. I hope you do continue to listen to Professor Game in 2018. If there's anything that we can do for you, please let us know. You can go to professorgame.com, go into any of the posts. You can talk to us there. You can talk to us through Twitter. You can see all the pictures for this episode, the show notes. You'll see some pictures from what happened in Gamification Europe. You'll have the full video as well. And please include, once again, into your purposes, making education amazing using gamification. Thanks, and see you around.